Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Hanzelka. I am the Reset Warrior, and I have a special guest here for you. His name is Cliff Sutton. Now, Cliff is an executive coach. He also dabbles in and has been coaching around neuroscience, which I find very intriguing as far as how your mind works. And he also does a couple of things that are, uh, you know, face reading, and he does all sorts of kind of cool stuff. So I'm just going to ask you to welcome Cliff Sutton. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel.
Now, Cliff, what is it? Just in briefly, just explain to our listeners, what is it that you exactly do? What is it that you're doing, and who you work with?
Well, I work with a variety of folks. Probably the dominant group I work with are bank managers, and within that group, a lot of people don't know bank managers are salespeople as well as managers. So they've got an interesting role. They wear a couple of hats, and they're also incredibly busy. And my job really is coaching them so that they're more successful, their teams are happier, and of course they do well for the bank.
So it sounds like, especially focusing with bank managers, that they wear quite a lot of different hats and what they have to do and what they're doing on a daily basis. How do you help them?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So how do you help them to kind of manage all that? Is that kind of what you get into? Is help them to become more efficient at what they're doing?
Absolutely. Now you picture somebody who's got all kinds of client interface every day. They have a team that also sells. And while it seems like when we go to a bank, the bank manager prepares a mortgage or a loan, but in fact, he is the selling arm of the bank and is very active in engaging other people. So you've got this, I call them player coaches. And what a lot of folks don't know is that it's quite a different hat when you are a salesperson versus a manager. So there are different skills. And where do you put the hours in the day? A manager will feel like he's spending his day very wisely, yet he's still carrying a bag home at night. And the higher up you go, the more it becomes intense in terms of the amount of work to be done. So it's very easy to get overwhelmed, to get frustrated. It's a great career, but it can really challenge you.
You know what? It sounds like they've got quite a lot of things that they have to do. And listen, bank managers are smart people, right? Yeah. Why do they need a coach? I mean, why do they really have to work with somebody like yourself? What's really behind all of that?
Well, it comes back to why we can all use a coach. And there's really two groups. One group is they're sitting there saying one day, is that all there is? Like, is this really worth it? And they're thinking, why don't I go back maybe to selling or take an inside job where I'm doing more administrative or service, because I'm doing my best here. And I'm struggling. It's taking up too much of my day. It's threatening my family life. And one of the big factors there is a lot of the training that a bank manager gets is centered around skills, behaviors, processes. However, the actual core of how I construct my day, how I get the most out of my people, is a conceptual thing. So a coach can help a manager see what he can't see himself, which you know yourself with coaches. Heck, half the time what we're doing is helping people sort of rediscover what they already know. And then they can apply it in a new way. And man, there have been recent technology breakthroughs that are just making all the difference in us understanding that. Then there's the other group who's just are always looking for the edge. What can I do so that I can do better? I can keep moving up the corporate ladder. I can enjoy my work. And they seek out someone like me as a coach because they know that I can help them. I can guide them. They do it, but I guide them.
So, I mean, I 100% agree with you when it comes down to coaching and coaches where they are at, really helping people to get to a place faster, right? And often, as you mentioned, people are overwhelmed on a daily basis with all of the things that they have to do, and sure. People get into the grind of things and they really forget what it is doing and why they're doing it. And you as a coach, what I'm gathering and what you're telling is you really help people to see what they can't see. often these things are right in front of them. And one of the things that I love to say is that really people pay us to expose them. The issue with that is like we don't like to be exposed, right? I mean, I'm sure that you have a coach, I have a coach, and often we don't see the things that we're around all the time. So how specifically, when it comes down to, and you mentioned neuroscience and all these things, I mean, some of this stuff, and I know I've been in the industry, I'm really interested in that probably sounds like some woo-foo stuff to a lot of people, like going, hang on, you know what, like you're telling me that there's actually a science in all of this?
Okay, let's do, yes, there is.
Okay.
And there's a science in how it works, which has just, wow, it's just incredible. It's just opened the sky for me as far as understanding when I'm relating to people. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Why don't we just look at a real-time example? This is a real bank manager example where, let's say the president says to the vice president, I'd like you to review the mortgage policy and make recommendations. And the vice president says, great. Now she says to me, look, I have this new project to do, but my plate is full right now. So this is looking like a home project. Any ideas? So we start talking about delegation and how could that work? And I coached her into what her options are. She could do the project herself. She could ask someone to do the research or the risk analysis, someone on her team, or have someone on the team do the whole thing, or maybe even decline it. We both know how well the declining part would go over with the president. So she opts to delegate the project, and we work together as to how to present that to her people. And then she fine-tunes it as they do the project. Now, this is a classic way of working the way the brain naturally works. Let's go behind the scenes a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
How that happens.
Well, try to give us more of a basics here, because I mean, when we start talking about it, especially science, I know a lot of people and start using words like neuroscience. Actually, when we mention neuroscience, can you put it more into, like, what if you're talking to a fifth grader, that they would understand, and what are we actually talking about here?
They're very good at this neuroscience. Fifth graders. Let me give you a perfectly good example. The project's done or may be done. Let's say that Michelle, the manager, is speaking to her team member who's working on the projects, and she says, how's it going with the project? That would be, in neuroscience terms, a towards approach. In other words, how did you feel when I said, how's it going with the project?
Are you asking me?
How did you feel, Daniel?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I found it a little bit overwhelming, and it was like there was quite a lot of work that had to be done. But I know it has to be done, so I didn't really feel like I should say something about that.
Well, how do you feel, though, personally, when I ask you that way?
Well, I feel like I really didn't have a choice. I just had to go and do it.
But I meant when you're now working on it, and the question is, how's the project going? So we're past that part about doing it. We can come back to that. But right now, you're in the project. We're having meetings every so often, and I've just asked you, how's it going with the project? How does that feel to you?
Well, it feels like you're interested in how it's going. At the same time, I might be feeling that maybe I can't really tell you exactly what's going on, because that overwhelm is still there. Yet I do feel that I need to be really working on it and moving it forward. So
in that case, we should have covered, when we originally made the agreement, first of all, that you wanted to do it, that it was something that you were interested in doing and had the time and capacity to do. And at that point, you'd be into the project, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is basically, consider yourself on a Caribbean beach for a minute. Completely different scenario.
Yeah.
Okay? So you're on a Caribbean beach, and I'm saying, how do you feel about this Caribbean beach?
I'm looking outside right now. It feels great.
Okay. Well, that's a towards response. That's where your mind says, hey, this is good. I'm turning on everything. I'm in the zone. In fact, bank managers tell me when they come back from, or during and after holidays, they come up with some of their best ideas. And you get in the zone of relaxation, of feeling confident and comfortable. Now let's try a different question. And this one would be the equivalent of you're shoveling the driveway after an ice storm. Now, how do you feel about that?
Like I'd rather be sitting on the beach.
So things basically shut down. The kind of question that brings that sort of response is, Daniel, did you finish the mortgage policy project yet?
Oh, I see.
Or
So
worse still, how come you haven't finished the mortgage policy?
putting even more pressure on that question. Yeah.
How's it feel now? I mean, can you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't feel inviting. It feels like, you know what, just leave me alone. Let me go get to it. You know, stop asking these questions.
How do I get out of here? Right?
Yeah.
That's an away response. Now,
Okay.
are you thinking creatively about how the project could go better, or about things you could do, maybe somewhere you could look or people you could talk to? Is that all going through your mind at that moment?
I'd have to say no. It would be more or less like, how do I just get out of here? And actually, you know what? You can have the project back. I don't want to do it.
Well, that's what we call an away response.
Yeah.
And away responses cause people to just say, I just want to do the minimum. I want to get out of here. Now, very often, inadvertently, we do that. As when we speak to people, when we manage them, managers can really turn people off and shut them down, and then things really start to escalate. Well, say something. And the next thing you know, this guy's, he may even just walk away. He may get so frustrated, and you have almost a confrontation. And the only difference was, how's it going versus, why haven't you got it done yet? Two different approaches.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the things, and obviously this is something that can be, you know, applied not just in, you know, working with bank managers. I mean, this is everyday life stuff, even with a family. So it's really important as far as how we communicate and what type of questions we ask. And I often tell people, you know, if you're not getting the results that you want, you're not asking the right question. And I think this is kind of what you're saying. It's not even the right question. It's even how you ask the question. So it's a little bit, you know, at a different depth, at different levels. But you know, communication is very important. So this is definitely something that can be applied in everyday life.
Well, when you're so right, and when you simplify it, the concept part that's really helpful is to say, I want to do towards discussions. I want to do towards questions, because that draws people towards me. And the incredibly important part is, I mean, the difference in the activity in our brain is like 14 centers light up and participate with that towards approach. And only about 5 light up, and most of them are in the survival area with away questions. So what I help a manager do is learn to speak that language, which is, he already knows it, or she does. We all do. We know that there are, if we approach people from the point of view that we're interested, first of all, that it's an upbeat conversation, that we're collaborating here, that we get much better results. And the team tends to really take ownership of their projects. So what we do is get the basic concept going, and then start coaching the subtleties of it. Like, how do I make sure there's clarity and agreement, and how do I make sure that that when I'm speaking to this person, I'm really thinking about them, I'm caring about them, really.
So it's just having a conversation at a different level of engagement. That's really what it comes down to. And again, bringing out the awareness. And I think, you know, when we start speaking, you know, with terms of, you know, neuroscience and awareness and consciousness, all of these things really are just the ways of having a better and more open communication, as opposed to more closed. I mean, you know, as you mentioned, you know, moving towards or moving away, but it's becoming more aware of what is actually going on and what effects we're having on individuals as we're speaking with them.
Absolutely.
Now, what, you know, you obviously specializing, you know, working with, you know, bank managers, and that's kind of your field of expertise, working with those specific, and, you know, as you mentioned, this goes outside of that. But what are some of the results that bank managers will actually see when you start working with them?
Well, the project we talked about, for example, okay, the two team members who did the project presented it to senior management along with the vice president. So what was the net result? I mean, the senior management team thought this was great. They recognized these team members as really interested, as go-getters. That's very positive for their career, as well as they learned more than they ever knew before about mortgages. And that would stead them in their banking career, stead them well. The vice president, through that project and some others she was working on, was promoted. And that means more money and also more responsibility on the job, which she was more capable of managing. So there's both financial and status a reward there. On the project itself, her involvement went from a projected 25 hours to 5 hours. Wow. So you start thinking about this and weighing the two. And when a manager starts delegating projects, for example, and there is a process for that, a towards process, because you want it to be with great spirits, with people who want to do it. And there are team members who jump at the opportunity for the exposure and the knowledge. You know, the people that if you got a big project to do, give it to a busy person. Those kind of people.
Yeah, I've heard that analogy, and it kind of always makes me wonder, okay, how do they do all that? And obviously they do things differently, and you know, they're more, I don't want to say they're just more organized. There's a lot more to it, but again, they know what they have to do, and they know their limitations. So, you know, from the perspective of you know, and we were talking about specifically with you know, with bank managers, but you know, as you're mentioning some of these things, you know, how can somebody like that's not a bank manager can actually use these things, or you know, have you had experience working with individuals, or maybe, you know, some things from your own personal life that you've experienced that where, you know, you're becoming more, and again, you know, we as coaches are hired to expose things. Once we start exposing things to individuals, we actually becoming more aware of what we're doing and how we're doing and where we're, you know, where we're at. So how would you you know, what are some of those things that you have noticed outside of the, you know, the field of expertise that you have working with bank managers?
Okay, that well, people can have? And this is a bank manager story, but it's personal, so it's interesting. Where you have a bank manager who is challenged relating to their teenage daughter, and they don't seem to have conversations. But as we started to discuss it, the manager, she began to realize that, was she really taking an interest in a genuine interest in what her daughter was interested in? Asking her about stuff that she was working on or playing with, or maybe asking her for some help on how to use a smartphone. I mean, what she discovered is if she started thinking from a towards perspective, what would this person welcome? And if I genuinely ask them and I'm ready to take the answer, whether it's what I want to hear or not, I'm saying, I respect you and I'd like to hear more. All of a sudden, the communication line started opening up. She shared with me. She started sharing stuff with her mom because she started to be confident that her mom was really interested. And it takes time. And I don't know if you've seen it with over and over again with parents that read to their kids. They relate to the kids better when the kids are teenagers.
Yeah. Well,
story, right?
There's definitely the, you know, the engagement, and I think, you know, what you're mentioning, and I tend to look at life from this perspective that, you know, we really live in there's four core areas of life, and they're all separate, but they're all related. And for me, it's faith, family, fitness, and finance. And everything's related. So what you're mentioning, you know, when you go into and work with somebody, you know, such as, you know, the bank manager at work, and you're helping them to really get better at what they're doing at work, that's going to spill into their personal life, right? Because
start asking and not always telling kids what to do. And when you think about it, one of the characteristics we talk about in the program is choice. as human beings, we love to choose. And when someone tells us what to do, or would, let me give you a piece of advice on that, right? How welcome is that comment? Really?
Your mind's probably already closing to the fact of, I don't really, let me give you a piece of my mind,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
I don't really want to hear about this. But.
If and it's hard sometimes as a coach. You ask an individual how they would like to solve a particular challenge they've brought up. What are their options? So we go through the options, and I don't necessarily come up with any. If they've got a couple there that they really like, and I hear one that's, I know it's workable, but it's a bit longer than I would take because of working with so many folks like that. I have an advantage. I have to say, that sounds really good. Now, how exactly would you do that? And they will go through it and describe it. And the key element is they own it, Daniel.
Yeah.
It's not mine, it's theirs. And they will go through fire to make their option work.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as you mentioned, we all want to have options at the same time. We all want to have options and choices at the same time. What I find with people, they find it very difficult to make that choice, right? Because
that's what we do. We help
Sorry?
them make the choice and the commitment based on, partly as a coach, you stand for somebody. You're in there with them. You said, yeah, I agree with you. What you're saying is a good plan. How are you going to implement it? And then help them fine tune it. But they know that the next time that we're talking on our next call, I'm starting to do laser coaching now, which are 15-minute calls. The next call, either did it or you didn't do it.
Yeah.
So these folks book the call, and they know that means they have to have done the work, because we take that precious 15 minutes out of their day and turn it into another success story for them, and also take it to the next level, find another thing to do. So it gets it's exciting. It's really kind of fun.
So one more question that I had for you, actually, and we talked about this before, and you mentioned to me that you do what's called, face reading, and face reading commands and all of this stuff. And again, this stuff's like, okay, hang on, this sounds again back to the woo-foo stuff. Like, okay, what's going on here? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, what is it that you're actually mean by that, face reading? Or
well, face reading is, as 5,000 years old or something. I would say it's as old as as long as there's been man, there's been face reading, whether they were camps of Neanderthals or whoever they were. They were certainly reading each other's faces when they were trying to predict the behavior to come. It's become quite a sophisticated science where facial features as opposed to emotions, okay, we're really looking at fixed features that gradually change over time, are very predictive of how we behave. So it can help a great deal if you understand that someone is very analytical and maybe very logically oriented, so that when you speak with them, you keep things in an organized, logical fashion. Whereas if you have someone else who's extremely people-oriented and is very emotionally driven, with them you go more to the impact of how it will affect them as a person, what will make feel good, how they can relate to with their friends, that sort of thing. So interestingly enough, narrow-faced people tend to be more analytical. Broad-faced people tend to be more big picture. Narrow-faced people tend to build their self-confidence through knowledge. They'll learn all about it, then they'll talk about it confidently. A broad-faced person will often just talk about it confidently anyway, even if their knowledge is relatively limited. So that when you're talking to the first person, the narrow-faced person, you want to have your facts very clear and keep it well proofed. And with the broader perspective person, get the big picture across and see how deep they want to take it. Two different approaches.
some of this sounds very, similar to, different personality profiles and all of this, but you're telling me this is all this can be done just by looking at somebody's, picture or a face and get some of these hints. I mean, so how accurate is this actually? I mean, how,
Well,
I find this
let's
fascinating.
test it, Daniel.
All right.
Okay, you have low eyebrows, similar to me, right? And they're
Yeah.
fairly straight across. You're a very logical guy, it tells me, and you're very creative. You got these little tufts here too, but you make decisions fairly quickly. Like you look at
Yeah.
something and you assess it. And also, people when they come to you, they're comfortable talking with you. One of the characteristics of people with these type of eyebrows is that others are comfortable with you, and
Okay,
you'll
you're
often.
starting to freak me out a little bit. You can tell all of this from looking at my face. Wow, I
I mean,
find this
that's just
fascinating.
your eyebrows.
Oh, okay, so this isn't all it. You're just beginning. That's what you're
Well,
telling me.
people
Okay.
will actually surprise you with how much they'll disclose on a first meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, often I call it, I create a safe space when I speak with someone, and yeah, they're fairly open. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a characteristic of people with low set eyebrows, like you have and like I have. Mine are a little more curved, so I'm not quite as logical as you are. I don't think. But that's an example of
Yeah.
how
Oh, okay.
you use it. So if I'm speaking with you, I know you're going to respond quickly to me. If you were high set eyebrows, you would be more standoffish. I would be more formal in my approach with you.
Oh, okay. You got me intrigued. You sort of got me intrigued because, as I mentioned, I've done a lot of different personality profiles and things that you can do, but usually people have to answer questions. Where what you're talking about now is, just essentially looking at a picture of someone, and as we know, social media and all of this stuff, really makes it available for us to go out there and search our, prospective clients and go and take a look at them. And definitely when you have a sales conversation, knowing more about them before you talk to them is very important. And that's often what I do in my coaching with clients is, tell them you want to know who your client is, and you want to know more about them than they know about themselves. And when you speak with them, that creates an instant rapport.
Well, think about here's a living example of how I would use it. And this is standard practice for me. I will look at someone's LinkedIn profile and I will read through it and say to myself, from the information I have here, where could I potentially serve this person? What I want to get in their shoes as much as I can. What are their day-to-day challenges are like? I'll read their face as well, their facial features, and I'll start comparing notes with the information I see there, so that when I connect with them via an in-mail or it could even be a call or a conversation of some kind, that I'll come from a place where I can actually start the conversation with, hi, I wanted to connect in or connect with you on LinkedIn, and particularly because I noticed this. And they typically will confirm what I've noticed, and they may or may not be applicable, but all of a sudden we know each other a little bit. So it makes a big difference.
So, this is fascinating as you mentioned this. We're talking about LinkedIn and all of this stuff, but obviously this could be very beneficial also for bank manager.
Yeah.
With the people that you're working with, because they could have somebody that walks in, a new client walks in through the door, and again, not that they have to sit there and look them up and down, but it can certainly help them in the first meeting when they already know what to look for and what somebody wants, because obviously somebody's more analytical, right? You got to give them more information, where there are people that they're just ready to act on certain things right away. So if you can have that insight with them pretty well instantly, this is what you're talking about, because a lot of personal profiles, obviously somebody's got to go and answer certain questions and things, but there are a few shortcuts on because of social media, but this is something that somebody can really use and get to understand them. And often what I tell my clients is, listen, first you got to get to know yourself, right? And this is where the expose, that's why you hire me, But the more you get to know yourself and how you're acting and why you do what you do, gives you a deeper understanding as to why somebody else does what they do. And you've certainly intrigued me with this whole conversation with face reading, and I know that there's a lot more that we can talk about and get really in detail. But what may be the best way for somebody to get hold of you, Cliff? I mean, where they can get in touch?
Well, I'll give you my cell phone's the best, because I think, like most people, it's always within 3 feet of me. And it's 416-930-6165. My email address is venturesnow, that's VENTURESNOW @gmail.com. And I would extend to anyone who'd like to a 15-minute call where we could talk about these things, and I could do some face reading for them if they wish, and maybe if they come prepared with a challenge or two, that gets really interesting, because we can look at it from a neuroscience perspective, and that's really what I get a bang out of, if you like, is helping people find those solutions to things they challenge them, and as well as providing technology, a way to do it yourself on a regular basis.
I think what it comes down to, and again, both me and you are coaches, and we love coaching. And I always tell people ask me, "What do you do?" And I says, "I'm doing it right now." He says, "What do you mean?" Well, I talk to people.
We're kind of doing it right now.
That's what it comes down to, right? So, and I tell people, I'm a coach. I always coach. I never turn it off, right? I mean, I do it with my family. I mean, there are certain boundaries that we have set, but often I tell people there's opportunities around us all the time to keep on and enhancing somebody's life and what we're doing, and I certainly appreciate this time that you spent with us and to our listeners, Cliff, and give it some knowledge, and we probably should go and do this again and just get a little bit more in deeper.
I think so. Maybe, yeah. Well, let's talk about it offline and pick a.
Yeah. We can get a little bit deeper, because this whole face thing, you got me completely intrigued by all of this, and I'm sure that our listeners will find the same from that perspective. So again, I appreciate your time, and looking forward to have additional conversations with you. And again, if you want, why don't you repeat your phone number again? That's probably the best way for people to.
416-930-6165.
All right.
And thanks again, Daniel. Until next time.
Talk to you soon.